Welcome, everybody. Thank you for participating in today's Department of Energy Solar Decathlon virtual session, which will address Resilient Home 411, strategies to weather and recover from natural disasters. My name is Jonathan Cohen, and I work on the Solar Decathlon, as well as run the Better Buildings Residential Network with your Department of Energy. We strongly encourage you to ask the questions that you want answers to on today's virtual session. That's why we are here and why we're doing this. We are part of the Solar Decathlon is an international competition, a collegiate competition issued in 2002 that showcases much more than just solar technologies. There are 10 contests that are the foundation of the Solar Decathlon that inspire student teams to design and build highly efficient buildings powered by renewables, while also taking into consideration affordability, resilience, and occupant health. And that's why we have a title that we do today, and why we have our guest speaker. Today we're going to go forward into our slides to the next slide to share with you what our agenda is today. And we're going to review, we have two ground rules that we ask everyone to abide by, particularly when they might ask questions and or chat in, and that sales of services and commercial messages are not appropriate during peer exchange calls. And two, calls are a safe place for discussion. Please do not attribute information to individuals on the call beside the speaker. And we, after this set of ground rules and agenda, will tell you what upcoming virtual sessions we have for you in this Solar Decathlon series. We'll briefly review the question functionality so you can ask the questions you want answers to, and we will then get to our featured speaker, who we are extremely pleased to have with us. He's quite truly a legend in the field, and so we're lucky to have him for today's session. Do note that views expressed by speakers in this series are their own, including today's speaker, and do not necessarily reflect those of the Department of Energy. So we'll go to the next slide, and we have upcoming sessions each month through April. Actually, the April session will be April 28th, not the 16th. And we have next month, Zero Energy Ready Homes, New and Growing Fast, on Wednesday, February 17th. And then in March, The Future of Solar, a tour of cutting-edge solar research with the U.S. Department of Energy's solar office. And then, of course, the actual competition culminates in April. And so, again, on April 28th, we will have winners from the Solar Decathlon Build Challenge. There's also separately a design-only challenge, just to mention. So we'll go on to our next slide and share with you that you can ask questions today by either virtually raising your hand where the blue arrow is in the upper left part of your screen, and there's that hand icon, or you can chat in where the red box is in the lower part of your screen in the middle, and you can ask a question that way. We'd ask you not to use too many acronyms in order to be able to decipher your question and share it with our guest speaker. And with that, we will move on to the next slide and do just that, introduce Scott Sklar from the Stella Group. He is a man who is incredibly accomplished. He's president of the Stella Group, which is a strategic policy and clean technology optimization firm facilitating clean distributed energy utilization that includes, and this is a bit of a list, advanced batteries and controls, energy efficiency, fuel cells, geoexchange, heat engines, mini generation, micro hydropower, such as free flow, tidal, and wave, modular biomass, photovoltaics, small wind, and solar thermal, including daylighting, water heating, industrial preheat, building air conditioning, and electric power generation. So, like I said, that was quite a list. The Stella Group is one of the very few companies that blends distributed energy and efficiency technologies and energy storage, aggregates financing, including leasing, with a focus on system standardization. Mr. Sklar founded the company in 1995 and joined it full-time as its president in 2000. Previously, he served for 15 years, simultaneously running two DC-based trade associations as executive director of both the Solar Energy Industries Association and the National Bioenergy Industries Association. Before his move to those two organizations, he was political director of the Solar Lobby, a renewable energy advocacy organization founded by the 9 major national environmental organizations. And before that, he was Washington director and acting research director of the National Center for Appropriate Technology, founded by Senate Majority Leader Mike Mansfield and technologist E.F. Schumacher. And so that, and there's a whole lot more in Scott's background. And so, again, we are very fortunate to have him, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce Scott Sklar to the stage. Scott, the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you. A pleasure to be here. I have a huge slide deck to get through to make sure we have questions, so I'm going to pop through fast. And obviously, I also teach 3 interdisciplinary courses on sustainable energy at George Washington University, including the first course in the country on renewable energy and critical infrastructure. And I teach seminars at Fort McNair at National Defense University and the Industrial College of the Armed Forces. Next. It was mentioned about my company. It's a 20-year-old company. I have projects on every continent, including Antarctica. And my job is to blend the entire portfolio of renewable energy, high value energy efficiency, and every kind of energy storage. And I've done that. And I've done 129 zero energy buildings around the world. Aside from my own, most of them are between, though, 8 and 25 stories. Next, please. So today we're going to talk about resilient buildings and self-powered houses, but self-powered meaning part or all, and we'll get into that in the presentation. Next. Okay, my overview section gets going. So I just want to start this putting everything in perspective. We have a huge, I'm saying this correctly, huge amount of renewable resources available on this planet. And this was put out by DLR, which does analytics for actually Germany's space program. And so at any rate, we have, if you can see this, we have over 2,500 times the solar energy we need on the that we use on the planet every day. Wind energy 200 times, geothermal 5 times, wave and tidal 2 times, hydropower 1 times, and biomass, which is just our waste that's turning into carbon, methane, we have 20 times. So we have a huge resource potential, and we just need economically to access a very small percentage of it to keep this planet going, and we can do that. Next, please. So, so getting right into it, I've just pulled different graphics of different kinds of buildings. So with everything, clearly energy efficiency is the lowest cost and fastest technology, fastest payback, insulations, windows, coatings and films, lighting, appliances. We'll get into some of that to reduce the load. And it's, again, always less expensive to save energy than generated from any source. And then we have, frankly, a very broad potential use of technologies then, both thermal, like solar water heating, and lighting, like solar daylighting, and geothermal heat pumps to make up the difference. And we're going to cover some of these things. But I thought I would give you this graphic at least to take a look at how some different players look at this. The next slide, I have a second one, just a different rendition on this, looking at, and we're, natural ventilation. This has daylighting, of course, solar and small wind. By the way, I blend a lot of small wind turbines in buildings because you may know solar works great when it's sunny, but doesn't work when it's not. And so when it's rainy or at night, and wind generally blows at those times. So I use a lot of marine turbines in buildings. I probably have quite a few hundred of them all over the world, attached actually on monopoles next to buildings. Next. So buildings are the largest energy consumer in the US and take a huge amount of primary electricity, grid electricity, primary energy, grid electricity, and natural gas. This is sort of a breakdown of what goes into buildings. And, that's fine. And so my goal obviously is to get in the projects I have. And remember, I don't sell anything. I'm not a project developer. I sell technology. I guide the end user. So the builder, the facility owner, the mixed use development owner, and what kinds of things go in the building envelope, go inside the building, and then go on or around the building. So to offset these loads. And of course, if you're looking at the biggest loads we see here, you see heating and cooling if you're particularly in southern, and lighting as very, very big players, and refrigeration not far behind. So I try to get the most absolute, LED lighting or solar day lighting, the most efficient refrigerators on the market, for instance, and of course deal with water heat and those kind of things. Next, please. So these are as actual zero energy buildings in Philadelphia made by Solar Strategies. These are pre-made and then dropped on the foundation. They have R30 insulation, double pane windows, solar water heating you see on the top near the peak of the roofs, photovoltaics, battery bank in the attic, actually geothermal heat pumps in the ground. And builders like it a lot of times because they just put the foundation in, and then the home's dropped on the foundation, and within 2 days somebody can move in, and you don't even have to wait for the utility hookup because you don't need it. Next. Trends. Let's rock. Next slide. So there are tons of slides on trends. I just picked a few. And so this is the Deloitte report, being a large accounting firm on global renewable energy trends. And basically they're just saying we're reaching a performance parity on or off grid, and we are. And so I have to say, every project I have is very cost effective and competes against the existing grid, or if they're on diesel engines. And the more important thing is whatever I'm powering never ever goes down. Next, please. This came out in 2020, and it was really looking at a new research report from Lawrence Berkeley, supported by Department of Energy, looking at interactive buildings. And, one of the issues is, are buildings in the future going to be just consumers of energy or providers of energy? We're doing the same thing with electric transportation. Our vehicles, whether they're buses, trucks, or individual cars, are they just going to be suckers off the grid, or actually when they're parked during the day where you work, or at night where you live, are they interacting with the grid, stabilizing the grid, and at the same time taking electricity from the grid and creating a more efficient system? So yes, they are. And buildings and vehicles are going to be part of the new grid we have, and it will make the grid far more reliable, far more efficient, lower cost and lower polluting than ever before. Next, please. So this is also 2020, and this is basically looking at reports by the Green Building Council on footprint of net zero buildings. And a net zero building, by the way, is a building, and we're talking about interactive buildings. If you're looking at a solar building, for instance, in the summertime, it may be pumping out more than it uses if it's net metered. And then in the wintertime, when sun's less, it may be taking in electricity from the grid. But over the entire year, the building, it equals out what they're taking in and what they're sending out. That's called net zero. And zero means they're not taking anything from the grid. And we're going to talk about that too. But net zero is going to be the predominant type of building, and it just shows there are 1 billion buildings in the world, and that footprint will double by 2060. Let's go. Next slide. So this is 2019, and this is a Haas Institute out of University of California. And basically what their study is showing is that how homes are electrifying. And so meaning that they're not using oil heat or water heating or gas heat or gas heating, but entirely electrification. And we're a little over a third. That is definitely going to go over 50% this decade. And I see ultimately buildings will be primarily totally electrified because of innovations in heat pumps and energy efficiency, and then of course on-site renewables. Next, please. So this is this is a 2020 study by Guidehouse looking at a report in the residential sector and basically saying home electrification increased from 2.4 billion in 2020 to 12 billion, or basically 5 times in 9 years. So the world is changing right under our feet. Next, please. So not only are our buildings being electrified, but we're starting to see a lot more Internet of Things in buildings. There's good and bad about that, of course. I'm not sure Putin can get in your house, but possible. But there's no question about it. Obviously, home entertainment, we all have smart televisions. A lot of them are web enabled. Lighting systems now, security systems, Ring doorbells, smart thermostats with energy management. My stove is smart. My new refrigerator coming in next month is going to be smart. It's pretty scary. The house is going to be much smarter than I am. There are some issues with that we're going to talk about, because if that stuff doesn't have electrification and clean electricity we're going to talk about, it's not going to work seamlessly. So let's go to the next slide. So building codes are going to be a key issue in this, and we're seeing a big change in building codes. And so this is ACEEE, the energy nonprofit think tank on energy efficiency, and they put out this on their blog. But the whole point I want to say is that many of the biggest cities, led by Chicago, New York, Washington, D.C., a few hundred cities now are doing not only enhanced building codes, but stretch codes, meaning you can build faster, get your permits faster if you put more in to save energy. And in the West, water. And remember, energy uses more water than agriculture. So looking at water use, energy has a big impact. Next, please. My personal examples, I walk this walk. Next slide. So again, I use the two buildings in the center of this picture are my buildings. And by the way, this is a company called Eagle View that uses satellites to look at your building. They have software where you can project the solar on the roof through the seasons, see if there's trees, mountains, other buildings blocking your sun any time of day. It's pretty exciting. So you see the building in the front in the middle with my giant SpongeBob for the holidays that I put out there. And you see I have a whole bunch of different panels on different sections of the roof. And that's because when I started doing this in 1985, solar wasn't really around, and I was running the solar trade group and wanted to show different kinds of panels. So I actually have solar panels from 11 different kinds of solar photovoltaic modules, we actually call them, from 11 different kinds of companies on there. And starting on the left-hand porch with the thin peel and stick panels on my metal seam roof, and all along sort of the top ridge of my southeast facing roof. And at any rate, and then in the middle of that roof, I have a solar water heater. And all that electricity goes into a big battery bank that you will see. I do not net meter either of these buildings, and I power both my buildings, and I have a lot of gadgets. My back office building, you'll see I have solar roofing shingles. You can't see from this picture, sadly, but I do have a wind turbine off the left corner and a hydrogen fuel cell in the rear. Both buildings, by the way, have one up front has R38 insulation with thermal barrier paint in the attic roof to reduce heat gain in the summer, and both have insulated windows, high efficiency. I have a web-enabled battery bank in the back building as well. So these are both zero energy buildings, self-powered, and both I have to tell you, my back office building has the highest electronics ever. This I did pre-pandemic. I was pretty smart, and of course now it's the best thing I could have done. Next, please. This is my back office building a little, and you might be able to see the monopole going off the left side of the wind turbine among the branches. Sort of hard to see in this picture, I'm sorry. You'll also see my solar daylight tube. And I have, by the way, an awning between my both buildings, and that has printed photovoltaic films on it, so it runs lights at night, so between the buildings. I do tours of my both buildings for architects, engineers, and international and U.S. government officials when buy technology, so they understand what's on the market. Next, please. And that's my house roof. You can see from the ground. It's hard because of that. You notice I do have a tree there, but for some reason, the angle of the sun's, it doesn't really do any real shade casting on the house. It just happens to be. I probably would have cut it down if it did, but that's where that projection software really works. Next, please. And I've done a peer-reviewed paper on zero energy buildings on Springer. And so there it is. And I'm happy to, if you email me at the last slide, send you a copy if you don't want to pay for it. Next, please. So all these benefits of what you want to do when you're on a building, you need to be aware of federal, state, and local government incentives. We've had the federal tax credit extended at 26% for the next 2 years, as what passed in December, and so that's great. And both for solar water heating and PV, and of some of the energy efficiency stuff. So know your federal tax law. And more than half the states, 29 states, have renewable energy portfolio standards, and I think some of them have their own freestanding energy efficient standards, which means you can get some incentive payments, benefits for doing that as well. And then you'll see a chart I have on state net metering, which means what are the rules to sell your excess power to the grid if you want to do that. I do want to remind you, though, that if you do that without storage, when the grid goes down, you go down. And note that some states have standby charges, which means they're actually giving you a charge for the right to sell them power. And I'm not a fan of it, but they've convinced their states to do it. States also have energy tax credits or tax waivers, at least so that you don't have sales tax on your efficiency renewables. You should know about it and take advantage of it. We talked about building codes, and you can get incentives to do certain things. And then a big movement is residential and commercial PACE programs, property assessed clean energy, where basically you're allowed to, instead of what you're paying on your property taxes, you're allowed to deduct that, not pay it, and put it into your efficiency or renewables. But when you sell your house at the end, you'll have to make up on those taxes during that sale. But it's a great way to make money available to do what you need to do. Next, please. I'm popping along. So these are the states that do net metering, meaning it's 38. It's actually more than that because you also have Texas and Idaho, which have some odd rules, and Georgia, in fact. So most of the states have it, and you have to, and it's again the right to interconnect and the right to be paid a fair rate for your power. Fair is in the eyes of the beholder, and of course the electric utility industry itself has its own view on what's fair because, of course, they feel they're losing customers. Next, please. These are the states that have renewable portfolio standards, and their goals. You see Hawaii wants to go 100% by 2045. The good news of this is out of Berkeley Lab. It's slightly dated, but the point being is know what your state's doing because you can benefit economically for it. Next, please. So some utilities on their own initiative or pushed by the State Regulatory Commission are having promotion programs. I just picked some that I thought were sort of sexy. And so this is Green Mountain Energy, looking in Texas, and lets customers power their homes with 100% solar energy generated in Texas. Solar battery systems, the one below in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Vermont. And these are interactive programs looking with the state regional power authority, the ISO in New England. And again, and there's going to be more of these. And of course, we have a new administration that really loves this stuff. And so I think you're going to see this and be prepared to take advantage of it. Next slide. So I just put this in there. This is a nationwide study on building codes from FEMA, the U.S. Federal Energy Management Agency under the Department of Homeland Security. And the whole point of this is loss prevention. That's what this webinar is about. The idea is we have an old grid, and that therefore by definition has outages. I do a whole half a day in one of my courses on how squirrels and other animals bring down the grid. We have intense weather patterns. The heat and hurricanes driven by climate change is more frequent. And we have a lot of different slides on how many events we have a year we have over $10 billion events every year now, where we used to have 2 or 3. We have earthquakes, of course, which are not tied to climate change. So we have a lot of different issues affecting your resiliency, and including in some cases spotty domestic terrorism. So the point being here is as our homes get more electronic with this pandemic, but I think it's going to go past pandemic, many of us are going to work more out of our homes. A lot of us rely on the Internet of Things to run appliances and business work. So being aware of how your buildings are and how you deal with this is very important. Next, please. So I have 2 decision slides here to walk you through logic. I hope this is going to spur on some of your questions. Again, in my class, which I always pound on my students, it's always less expensive to save energy than generated from any source. So the first thing you can do is insulation. I am one of these people, and I have some experts who disagree with me. The higher is better. Absolutely, no question. I use, because of all this efficiency, 1/3 of the energy than any home in North Arlington, Virginia, which is a few minutes outside Washington, D.C. And therefore, the amount of things I need to do to power my home costs less. And of course, it pays for itself. Lighting, LEDs, solar daylighting, I've talked about it. We've talked about appliances. We're going to get into some of the labeling. Water heating. If you're not going to do anything sexy, at least put in a super insulated solar tank so your water tank stays hot longer and doesn't need to be heated up. I love solar water heating. It's cost effective. I've done some heat pump water heating. I've done waste heat off the air conditioning system or the furnace if you have that. So absolutely. And then for my projects now, I only do ductless or radiant systems, meaning no ducts. I use radiators. I use these refrigerant air exchangers that are basically boxes with little 10-watt fans in them. But the goal is, absolutely, I'm not a fan of ducted systems at all because A, they leak even when they're insulated. B, there are things that grow in them, and duct pumps use a lot of energy. And then, of course, renewable energy has efficiency, solar water heating, solar daylighting. I have a ductless refrigerant-based geothermal heat pump. So it's like a ductless traditional outside heat pump, but this one, of course, exchanges the heat in or out of the building. And it works very well. Next slide, please. So what the decision slide for you are, do you want to own and take tax credits? And if so, do you want financing with that? Um, and so there are some companies that do that. And of course, if you want to own and take the tax credits, that's great. Or do you just want to pay less per month than you're paying from your utility bill? And depending on what your building is and where you are, you can have a system leased, like the Tesla systems, including their battery banks, they've leased. You can have power purchase agreements where you're just paying for the electricity, or you can have energy performance service contracts for both energy efficiency and renewable systems. All are different financial tools. Basically, at the end, what you're doing is you're paying a monthly fee. You don't own it, but you're paying less per month than you would from the utility grid. And we use a lot of these techniques aside from self-purchasing. That's your call. And then your other issue decision is, do you experience frequent outages or harsh weather? And if you do, you may want energy storage. And so we did here where I live, again, a couple of miles outside of downtown Washington, D.C., we got tons of outages, primarily because we have an old grid system and lots of squirrels. So now when we have outages 3 or 4 times a year, if it's in the evening, my neighbors knock on my door and come in my house and drink my single malt scotch, and that's fine with me. So a lot of times I'll say you don't need the storage for the whole house. Why don't you pull a sub-circuit breaker panel and attach your Wi-Fi, your telephone system, your sump pump if you have one in your basement, your refrigerator, maybe your electronic ignition on your gas stove, some lights and a few outlets, maybe a small TV. And so a subset of your functions are off the grid all the time, so you're saving energy. And when the grid goes down, you can easily go through that. You got entertainment, lighting, communications, heat, so whatever you want. So remember, sizing of the solar system, and if you have a battery bank, should make both economic sense and fit the size of your home and your standard use. I don't do residential systems, but I have a lot of people coming to me saying, hey, the solar company wants to sell me this giant system. And I said, but what are you really getting when you net meter? And is that really the best for you? Or maybe it should just be sized for what you really use. And so I want you to really think about that. Bigger is not better. It may be better, but it's not necessarily better. So that is my guide to you on that. Next slide, please. Technology choices. There are going to be a lot of things here, and I'm just going to run through it. But I put this up for solar water heating. This is what the California Solar Industry Association chart I put out on the benefits of solar water heating. Now, by the way, I put my solar water heater on when I was putting on my second story. It added $2.97 to my renovation mortgage a month, and saved me back then $18.75 a month. So I was cash positive the day I did it. Depending on how you do solar water heating, it's always basically a big economic benefit, but it also has a lot of, as you can see here, environmental benefits. Next, please. Geo exchange, this is where you're putting pipes in the ground, some either filled with water, which is traditional, or the newer ones with refrigerant. You can do them horizontal, like this picture has, or you can actually do them. I had to drill, I have a smaller yard and where I wanted to put it, so we drilled 100 feet down 4 pipes, 2-inch bore, copper at a slant, filled with greenhouse gas friendly refrigerant. But basically, it's a refrigerator. I mean, what you're really doing, I want you to think about a refrigerator. A refrigerator is an insulated box like a house with tubes, in these cases filled with refrigerant, and it conveys the heat out of the box, which is why it's cooler. You convey more heat out of the box, you have a freezer. So in the summertime, all I'm doing is conveying my heat out of my ground, into the ground. I have a well-insulated house, and I actually could turn into a refrigerator. My dog Elvis wouldn't like that, so I don't do that, but I could do it. And then you reverse the process in the winter. So that's all it is. You're exchanging heat in or out of the ground. What's nice is once you get 15 feet under the ground, it's 55 degrees Fahrenheit steady. So think of winter where you have a regular heat pump. If it's 20 degrees outside, you're trying to bring your heat up 50 degrees. Well, if it's 20 degrees outside and the geothermal pipes are under the ground, it's 55, and you're only bringing it up 15 degrees. And that's really the essence of the energy savings in the winter. Next slide. PV system. So this is the best slide I could find that's pretty colorful. And so you have the solar electric panels on top of your roof. You're producing DC electricity. So your DC electricity can do either things. It can go into an inverter, which is what turns the AC to DC, or it can go directly into a battery bank, which is DC, just like a flashlight. And so that's really what it is. And then it goes into your main panel, and then it goes into your house. And if you can't use it all, it flips out of the power lines through your electric meter, and there it is. So, and these days, most of the solar companies have mated components. Didn't happen in the early days, meaning when you work with a solar company, they have one or two different kinds of inverters, charge controllers if you're charging batteries. They work with their different kinds of batteries. By the way, you have a lot of battery choices. So these are worked out. They are all in compliant with the IEEE, which is the technical organization that deals with electricity compatibility and safety. And of course, individual things are UL, and we'll get into that. Next slide. There's a lot of new technologies on the market. I just wanted to show you the different ones Tesla are putting out. Half the homes in the United States are under homeowner associations. The large majority ban solar, so having roofing shingles or things that look like skylights can get around a lot of that. California has pretty much banned it by law. Virginia here has some rulings about it, but we're still fighting a lot of homeowner associations about it. But we have a lot of different choices. When you're picking a solar company, pick ones, make sure they send you pictures of their installations of homes like yours, not California movie star homes, but homes like yours. Next, please. This is just another one of the roofing shingles to take a look at it. Next, please. So there are a lot of calculators. I use the National Renewable Energy Lab funded by the Department of Energy PV Watts calculator. And so this just gives you a little example. So you can put in data from what you pay from your bill and where you are and calculate how much you're going to get a day or a year and focus on that. And by the way, your solar company that puts it in uses this or something that's comparable. But you can use it as well. Next, please. I'm going to skip that, but this is the FEMA on building codes. And again, it just gives you a sense and a link if you want to look at what modern building codes impact on energy savings. Next, please. Financing. Let's go. Next. So I talked about this briefly, but power purchase agreements, meaning you sign a longer term contract and you pay for the electricity. The bad news is, again, you don't get tax credits. The good news is you only pay for what you get. If it doesn't work, of course, you're not paying for it. And of course, the owner of that really wants you to pay for it, so they're going to fix it up real fast. And the good news is they also, at the end of its life, 2025. Now, my initial panels went on in 1985, so they're 35 years old, and we're still working great. So just because it's warranted for 20 or 25 years doesn't mean it dies that moment. But if you need to get rid of it, it goes to that. Leasing, same thing. This is not a power purchase agreement, It's just like a car you lease. You have a certain amount of years. you have the lease for, and you just what you pay a month. And then the shared savings, the energy service performance contracts, a company comes in and says, hey, we'll put in a solar water heater, your solar electric, LED light bulbs, maybe water saving shower heads. This is part of the package, and this is what you'll pay a month. It's less than, you'll pay less than what you're paying if it were buying electricity from the utility grid or the natural gas company, but you still have to pay us because we installed the equipment and we paid to have it installed. Next, please. I talked about CPACE. I don't want to get into that. I also want to say for those of you that live in lower income areas, opportunity zone money out of the tax bill during the prior administration can be accessed for this. And for those of you, there is Mush Market, which is university schools, hospitals, but community solar, which is not on the building, but near your buildings that you can access for those of you that have old buildings, historic buildings, or no solar access on your property because of trees or other buildings or mountains or hills. You might be able to get solar electricity through your university school hospital projects that are popping up all over the country. Next, please. Okay, let's go. Tracking your savings. There's a lot of different technology and software. I cannot cover them all. I only have 4 minutes here, so I'm just going to run through this. But there are all kinds of controllers that are web enabled. Next, please. This is right out of my own home. I have a Variant inverter by Outback, and the two charge controllers on the right there, those black boxes are web enabled. I can see what's coming off my solar panels into my batteries, and the white gizmo off my inverter. I can see how much solar I'm getting and what's going into my building. Next, please. There's all kinds of apps tied to what kinds of system, and you should really check with your solar installer or wind installer or heat pump installer. Now that can go on your smartphone. This is the Solar by Solar Edge, and look at what's happening, and you can even click, and if it's not working right, just click it and it will dial automatically and send a message to your installation company saying come and fix it up. Next, please. There are all kinds of systems to take a look at a resident and see, so you can go on your, again, smartphone, your iPad or your tablet or your computer and take a look at what's working today. And you can see here from the bottom chart, midday around 12 noon, you're getting the highest solar output. Obviously, you're not getting it at 12 a.m. in the morning when it's dark, but you can track it. And of course, over time, if you see that arch going down when it's nice and sunny, then you go, hey, not all my panels are working, or they're wiring problem, or maybe it's a inverter problem. I don't know, but you can figure this out almost intuitively. Next, please. These are just other systems. Let's next, please. I'm not going to even go through them. And you can track, this is the power meter, and see what in the day you're popping in solar power. Next, please. This is the end phase. So these are coming off your micro inverters on every single panel, and you can track when the output is by panel if you want. Next, please. And just another one. This is the Tumalo. This does battery management. So you can see, off this, I drew 654 watts of solar at this moment, meaning 99% of my power and just 49 watts, a small bulb worth from the electric grid. And this is what's going in and out of my battery. And I use these technologies all the time. So you can see how your solar panels are working, or your wind turbine, tied to your battery bank, tied to your energy uses. What fun. It's a brave new world. Next, please. Leasing. Let's flip through it. Next slide, please. Pay secure. And these are just different financial tools. Let's keep going. They came out of my energy storage. This is the best chart I can find. I use it in my classes all the time on the benefits of energy storage. I want you to look at the orange arc on the left. And these are the 4 benefits to you as a customer: backup power, increased PV, photovoltaic, or wind, or on-site distributed energy self-consumption. If you have demand charges, which is not necessarily residential, it's mostly commercial, meaning after you use a certain amount, your rate goes up, you can work your system so you never have that. Or time of use bill management, meaning if you have peak power rates or seasonal power rates or ratchet rates during the summer, you can size your system to zero out those higher cost rates. So battery storage provides a lot of services, and you need to be aware of that and what's going on in your state or in your utility service territory. Next, please. This is one of the earliest standardized systems. GridPoint, no longer around, but that's what's in my back office building. But the good part of it is, it used to be a solar installers or your electrician would bring in a bunch of batteries, put in a cabinet. This one, all of them now have microprocessors, and instead of taking 2 days, it takes an hour and a half to set up. Next, please. And these are all on the market now. This is my traditional battery bank in my home before they had standardized. So I have 16 absorbed glass matrix batteries out of California. So there they are. They all have meters, and they're sitting sort of in a covered area as you walk down the steps to my basement. Next, please. This is the Tesla system. Next, please. This is Electrique. That's in Europe, but coming to the United States. Next, please. This is Sonnen out of Germany. Here in the United States, I'm using a lot of these in Puerto Rico. Excellent system. Next, please. This is LG, sold in the United States here. Gorgeous system. Next, please. This is Span. Next, please. This is out of Johnson Controls, the first larger building battery bank, and the batteries are swappable, and now is distributed by another company, but it's a gorgeous system. Still use them. Next, please. Labeling standards and codes. Going to go very fast on these two just to acquaint you. These are the Energy Star appliance system codes. Again, there should be no appliance that have a low operating cost. Next, please. Solar water heaters have certification for the Solar Rating and Certification Corporation. So you can do it by collector or system. Next, please. We now have amongst state governments, a nonprofit that certifies installers. I want to tell you one fact. 92% of the failures of all these technologies we're going over is not the technology. 92%. It's installed incorrectly. And when I get hired by companies to find out why things don't work, and I am stunned. So either you look for a NABCEP accredited company, or you get 5 installations just like yours in your area with pictures and contacts to the people, and you email or talk to them all. Because again, if it's not installed correctly, it's just going to be painful. Next, please. I just want to point out that solar panels and all the electronic equipment has United Laboratory certification. And you can go on the website and make sure whatever panel, if you haven't heard of it, is or comparable. Next, please. Oh, wait a second. Back. Can you do it back? Bottom. I put a link here. This is the State and Utility Incentive website, Desire. You can go on a map in any state, click down and see what benefits you have from different utilities and state and local governments. Very important. Next, please. And again, there are different companies. I showed you Eagle View in the beginning. This actually is a picture from another company. But the point being is, you're an installer and you can find out where your best spots on top of your roof is on your building. And not only that, by season, because the sun might hit it very differently in the winter versus the summer. And then you can figure out where your hottest spots are, and that's where you put your panels. Why not? Next, please. And these are different rating programs for buildings. Links. Next, please. And I just want to remind you, there's no planet B here. So good planets are hard to find. So not only this makes economic and resilient sense, but we are all members of this great planet. Next, please. And final, oops, I had one which was where you can contact me, but they're also on the front 2 slides. You may contact me at any time. I answer all emails. I probably have more studies and reports than most people alive. So there I go, ready for questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Scott, for that fantastic presentation and for distilling your tremendous knowledge to the participants on today's virtual session. So looking at the screen, we see how questions can be asked either by virtually raising your hand or by chatting into the box. So please do ask your questions in the 10 minutes or so that we have left with Scott on today's session. So I'm now going to turn things over to my colleague, Tyler, to see what questions have come in over the line for Scott. Tyler, over to you.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, Scott, and thank you to our audience for asking these great questions. So I will jump right in with one from Terrence, who asks, what role do you see for direct current in the integration of buildings into the design of the future grid?
What a great question. I am a big direct current fan. DC current, remember, we use AC current in our buildings, but we use DC current in our cars. We use DC current in our recreational vehicles. And almost virtually everything we have in our home and business now has a little charge box in it, works off of direct current. TV station, televisions, computers, all your Wi-Fi and web-enabled things. And a lot of, frankly, a lot of your washing machines or refrigerators are really direct current, and they turn it into, they bring it from AC and turn it back into direct current after it comes out of the wall. And you lose electricity from that. You lose efficiency. So I've done some DC buildings, and I do believe there'll be future development of DC. But since we're getting digitized, meaning all chips use DC current, I see it as a big driver. And you're going to see it first in businesses, but I think I'm going to see it and starting to see it in homes as well.
Great, thank you, Scott. And you had mentioned, I think that you had a hydrogen fuel cell on one of your properties, and we got a question asking where are you storing hydrogen fuel cells? I guess either on your property or in others in your consulting work.
Well, I'm using deployable fuel cells. My one on my behind my office building, I get one delivery a year of recycled industrial hydrogen canisters. It's in a metal it's in a metal box with all the codes and stuff. And again, that's a power augmenter, mostly during the summer when in this area where I live, we get a tropical storms every third summer that has 2 to 3 weeks of thick clouds with very little sunlight. Now my wind turbine helps, but I use it then. It costs me about $78 a year to get the hydrogen in. So it's not expensive and it's very clean power and goes into the batteries. So you have to be, it's starting to get ready for prime time on the building level. It's much more ready for prime time on the infrastructure side. So I'm using it in off-grid locations on airport runways and cell towers and things like that. But it definitely is a technology that's on the come, and I'm a big fan of it.
Actually, yeah, we actually had another question from a different attendee who asked if you see any future for fuel cells in new buildings, and it sounds like you do, maybe a little bit after they kind of come on into their own in terms of infrastructure. But
yeah, I think you need some local government support on that. There are certain states like Connecticut where they have a big fuel cell industry and they're trying to do it. I think you're going to see it more in the commercial sector first, and of course infrastructure, which I do a lot of. I do want to let you know there are, for both questions, there is a DC electricity group based here in Washington promoting the use of direct current. And there is a fuel cell and hydrogen association here in Washington that promotes, has the industry and promotes the use of that too. So there are links of that you can Google and get easy.
Great. Thank you very much. I had a question from Richard who said, I think that you mentioned going 100 feet deep with your ground geothermal as opposed to a more traditional 15 feet or so. He asked if you were combining uses, such as adding to your water supply to that drilling project.
Oh, okay. So if you're going horizontal running the tubes, you have to be at least 15 feet below the surface. If you're going if you can't go horizontal for some reason, like I did, because the side of my house that I decided to do it in, I had little land, then you have to go down. So I wasn't drilling for water here. Again, this is refrigerant based, but I need a certain amount of linear feet to get the tonnage I need for heating and cooling. So that's why it went that way. So again, you need the more feet you have, running feet of pipe, the more tonnage of heating or cooling you get. And that's driven both by the size of your building, your behavior, and again, how much insulation and window and good energy efficient windows you have.
Okay, thank you for that clarification and additional information. I have a question from, well, I guess a question and a comment from Aaron, who asked if you have a podcast or radio show. Aaron also says that you have the voice and the charisma, so maybe something to think about if not.
I've always wanted to do that, but I don't have I can't figure out how to do that. But I've always felt there is a need for not only a teacher but a practitioner to share this kind of information. So I have thought about it.
All right. Well, maybe if somebody in our audience wants to help Scott out, feel free to get in touch. We will be sharing a recording of this webinar and posting it to the Better Buildings website, and that will include a follow-up email to everybody with us today. But back to the questions. Richard asked, how can we reliably protect rooftop solar installations and homes from lightning strikes in lightning-dense regions, such as southeast Louisiana?
That's a great question. There's about 7% of the United States that has some issues like that. Louisiana, some of the mountains in the Northeast, on the West too. I mean, generally what I've been doing is in those cases are lightning rods to ground it and to drive it away from the make sure it doesn't hit the roof and drive it away from the structure. That's probably the best. Also in those regions, on my house pictures, you might notice the panels go slightly above the peak, but you don't want to do that if you're lightning prone. You want the panels never to go slightly above the peak. You want it lower than the peak. And again, it may be good to have a rod there. I actually put the rods away from the building, but near the building. But you can do it on your building, but to conduct it away. The whole issue is to not to have your panels be an attractive conductor. And so, and there are ways to do that on how you mount them, so that you bring its functionality more horizontal than optimally slanted sometimes. And there's some good work that some of the national labs, frankly, have done on that issue. Sandia National Lab, and I believe National Energy Laboratory as well.
Thank you. And looking at the clock, I think we have time for one more question. However, since we did get quite a few, Scott, if it's all right, I will just go ahead and share those questions with you, and then you can respond as you like after the fact. And if anybody would like to get in touch with Scott, as I mentioned, we will also be sharing his contact information in a follow-up
I wanted to know if you share them with me, and I can write some short responses, and you can post them.
Yeah, that would be fantastic, Scott. Thank you very much.
I want to make sure I answer everyone's question. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And one more question on the air. We had a question from Elise, who just asked, how much power does your wind turbine produce?
I have a 0.5 kilowatt wind turbine. I use a lot of marine wind turbines, and there are 3 reasons. One, they're very available and very low cost. Secondly, they work off of whispers of wind. And thirdly, they're very quiet, so you don't have any complaints from neighbors. And also, the tiny wind turbines do not kill any birds or squirrels or anything, or bats or anything else. So, And again, I've done hundreds and hundreds of them around the world. So those are the ones I've used. The larger wind turbines you can use, but you have to be in a community, more rural community that will allow that. And we have some great companies around the United States that make all sizes of wind turbines. And there is a small wind office within the Department of Energy and the wind program, and there is a distributed wind association. So please check those out. I love them. And again, they generally work when it is not sunny, and that's exactly what you want.
An excellent parting thought. Thank you very much for that, Scott, and for your time and your answers to our audience questions. Thank you to our audience for attending and for asking those questions. And I see that it is exactly 2 o'clock. So, Jonathan, I will turn it back over to you to lead us out for the day.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you to everybody for the great questions. And thank you once again to our fantastic speaker. Scott Sklar is eminent Grease. He is a legend in the field. We are very fortunate to have had him on our session today, so we can't thank him enough. And so we are going to see, let's see, if we fast forward past this current slide, Tyler, I think we might have an outgoing slide. Let's see.
No, I think that was it.
Nope. Oh, okay, that was it. Well, then with that, I will say thank you again to everybody. Tune into our next session in February, and then we have 2 more after that. Thank you for being with us. That concludes today's session, and have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.